2 juries here have been unable to reach a verdict in the case of 2 young men, Eric and Lyle Menendez, who admit to fatally shooting their parents. Tonight, we've teamed up with Court TV to bring you the most detailed look at the trial. Not just what happened, but what it means.
We'll show you the strategies and the mistakes on both sides. We'll take you inside the jury room. What would your verdict have been? And we'll examine what this case says about the judicial system and what it could mean to similar cases. Let's begin at the scene of the crime. Pay attention. Small details often made a big difference to the jury.
At this time, we have 2 deceased persons inside, a male and a female.
August 20, 1989, 10 p.m. Jose Menendez and his wife Kitty were in the family room of their Beverly Hills home. Their killers came down the front hall through the French doors and began firing as they moved into the room. Jose Menendez was hit 5 times, including a round to the back of the head at close range. His wife had 10 wounds, one made with the gun against her cheek.
I've seen a lot of homicides, but nothing quite that brutal. Blood, flesh, skull. It would be hard to describe, especially Jose, as even resembling a human that you would recognize. That's how bad it was.
The killers carefully collected the spent shells and left the scene, a scene that deeply affected some of the jurors.
I would have held the door open on the gas chamber while the prosecution presented its case. I was that angry at how heinous this crime was.
Later that night, the victim's 2 sons, Lyle, 21, and Eric, 18, called the police.
You were crying, correct?
Right.
And at the same time, you were lying while you were crying. Is that correct?
Right.
The call was a hoax, a brilliant bit of acting the jury would remember. 4.5 years after the killings on Elm Street and 6 months after their trial began in this Van Nuys courthouse, the world now knows what police suspected from the beginning.
I was just firing as I went into the room. I just started firing.
In what direction?
In front of me.
What was in front of you?
My parents.
And was Lyle to your right or to your left?
He was to my right.
You remember firing a very close shot at your father?
I believe so.
You reloaded? Is that yes?
Yes.
And what did you do after you reloaded?
I ran around and shot my mom.
Where did you shoot her?
I just reached over and I shot her close.
With that kind of graphic testimony, how could the defense possibly hope to win an acquittal? By convincing the jury that the killings were justified. And when we come back, you'll see how the defense put the victims on trial.
His own jury. We talked candidly to the lawyers before the mistrial was announced last week, before they could put their own spin on the results. Here now for the first time, the defense strategy.
To sum up then what we intend to prove. Eric Menendez was the abused son of wealthy parents. He killed his parents because he could no longer endure their abuse and had to stop it.
The Menendez defense was similar to the battered woman defense, which has been used successfully by abused wives who've killed their husbands. But this was one of the few times it had ever been offered in such a high-profile case of children killing their parents. Attorney Jack Ford.
What the defense had to prove was this. Firstly, they had to show that all of this abuse did happen, that they were subjected to this over the course of their lifetimes. Secondly, they had to show that because of the abuse, their perceptions were different from other people's.
To claim self-defense, the brothers had to convince the jury that they genuinely believed they were in imminent danger that night. The brothers said they felt their parents were actually plotting to kill them, that their father was afraid his sons were about to blow the whistle on years of physical and sexual abuse.
I told him that I would tell everybody I would tell everybody everything about him. I would tell the police, and that I would tell the family. And I was yelling, and it was pretty. I may have said some more things and swore at him or something.
What happened after you stopped?
Then he said, "We all make choices in life, son. Eric made his, you've made yours." And then he just looked at me, and he got up to leave.
What did you think was going to happen?
I thought we were in danger. I thought he felt he had no choice.
But to what?
That he would kill us. That he would get rid of us in some way.
The defense felt it was important for the jury to see the killings through the brothers' eyes.
It's their belief. It's an individual belief. And so the real dispute is over what is reasonable. Well, the real fight is over what is reasonable to someone raised normally, and what is reasonable to someone battered and abused is very different.
Well, he had told me never, ever to tell anyone.
And did he ever tell you what the consequence would be of telling anyone?
He would kill me.
And my dad had closed the doors, and I didn't believe that Dad was going to finish any movie or talk to Eric. I thought he was just buying time. And I realized that they had been waiting for Eric to get home, like I had been. And I just freaked out.
What did you think they were doing in the den? What did you think was going to happen?
I thought they were going ahead with their plan to kill us.
Court TV's Terry Moran was in the courtroom for much of the testimony.
The afternoon that Lyle Menendez took the witness stand for the first time, the atmosphere in the courtroom completely changed. This trial turned around.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
It was very strange. It was very dark. He turned off the lights, and it would be very dark, and it would be very quiet, and he would do these things to me.
Many of the things Jose Menendez would allegedly do to his sons are too graphic for network television. But for days, both brothers testified in incredible detail to acts of molestation and sodomy.
He would have me give him oral sex, and he would stick the needles or the tacks into my thighs as he was doing this.
Even the prosecution conceded that the brothers' dramatic testimony had helped their case.
I don't think that they would have had a chance with the jury if they hadn't been emotional. That's just part of how you do it. This is a production. A trial is a production. People say that it's a search for the truth, but I've yet to see a trial that really resembled a search for the truth more than it is a production.
The defense team was relieved.
There's nothing more harrowing than having your client on the stand. It's like putting a baby in the middle of traffic. You just hope that the trucks dodge him.
To bolster its case, the defense had called experts on sexual abuse and family members who said they heard long ago about incidents involving the brothers.
Well, he told me his father was massaging his...
He used that word?
Yes, he did.
He and his dad had been touching each other, and he indicated that it was in his genital area.
And did you tell Kitty what Lyle had told you?
Yes, I told her what he had indicated to me, what he was telling me, what he was showing me.
How did she look? Did she look shocked, or
Did
she show any emotion?
She showed that she did not believe me.
According to the defense, Kitty Menendez was much more than a bystander, taking part in both the sexual and psychological abuse of her sons.
Did you continue to sleep in her bed around this time when you're 11 and 12?
Sometimes.
And sometimes, did you touch your mom?
Yes.
Would your dad be in bed?
Sometimes.
And where would you touch her?
Everywhere.
For the defense, this kind of testimony was critical.
There's a level of craziness here that we're trying to show. I don't think the boys told them. Of the anecdotes they told, we easily had 3 times as many more that we didn't tell, because you don't want to go on forever.
Kitty was described as an alcoholic, obsessed by her faded beauty and failing marriage, resentful of her children who cut short her dreams of acting.
Was there a time where you upset your mother as she was preparing dinner and she cut herself?
Yes. She pushed me against the glass and she rubbed her hand in my face and said, "See what you did to me."
Did she get blood on you?
Oh, yeah. Her hand was a mess and my face was a mess. And I ate dinner that way.
Why did you eat dinner that way? Why didn't you wash it off?
I went to wash it off. She said, "No, just leave it. Just eat."
So it may sound like small things, but it's an endless catalog of small things.
Jose was described as a father who ruthlessly groomed his sons for success, even ordering Lyle to get a toupee to improve his chances in business or politics, and as a pervert who preyed on both other women and the brothers.
He told me that he was going to train me how not to feel pain, not to have to feel the hurt of the pain, and that he was going to eliminate that from my senses, my feelings.
And did he also use a knife at any time?
Yes, he would. He had this wooden kitchen knife that he would use to just... He wouldn't be doing anything with sex at that point, though. He would just have me sit on the back of the bed. He would put a towel under my legs, and he would just cut my thighs with the knife.
It was all part of a defense strategy to make the jury focus on Kitty and Jose.
They painted a picture here of parents who were monsters, and if the jury bought everything the defense had to say, they might say to themselves and then come out and say to the prosecution, you know what, these men were created by these parents, the parents forced them to take their lives, and maybe in a sense they deserved it.
As the presentation of the defense spun out over weeks, the prosecution worried it had also taken the jury further and further from the central issue, the horrible deaths of Jose and Kitty Menendez.
I think they were very effective in making this case very long, and it's been a long time since the coroner testified. It's been a long time since some of the other witnesses testified. And so that, I think that in and of itself has been a problem for the prosecution.
The defense attorneys had also introduced these 2 photographs, which they say were found on a roll of pictures from Eric's 6th birthday.
I think the fact that these heads are cut off and there is such a focus on the genitals is unusual and certainly should create some level of concern about the motivation of the person who took them.
He would take photographs of us, our private parts.
And did he ever show you those photos?
No.
At this point, the prosecution knew the outcome was no longer a sure thing.
Case. The defense has done an excellent job of trying to muddy the waters, but this is classic textbook premeditation, and that's why it's a first-degree murder.
Despite the stories of sexual abuse, the defense offered very little in the way of physical evidence, a childhood medical record of an injury to Eric's throat, and the prosecution challenged that.
So you can't extrapolate at all from that what was the source of the injury, correct?
That's correct.
And you found nothing else aside from sore throats in his childhood medical history to corroborate a claim of sexual abuse. Is that correct?
That's what I've just said.
Along with expert witnesses, the defense hired consultants, and gone were the designer suits. Had they dressed the brothers for effect in boyish sweaters and button-down shirts?
Every single client I ever take to trial wears a sweater and a shirt, every single one, because I think suits look ridiculous. And that was it. It was no big cap. We didn't hire a media consultant. We didn't hire a style consultant. Nothing.
But as the trial moved to a close, the defense team itself came under attack.
Keep in mind that this is the best defense Daddy's money could buy.
The defense took it as a sign the prosecutors were worried.
Do you want my interpretation? They're outclassed, outmaneuvered, and outlawyered.
Was the prosecution outlawyered in a case that had been called a slam dunk? When we come back, you'll hear how the prosecution tried to prove that the killing of Jose and Kitty Menendez was nothing short of cold-blooded, premeditated murder.
And their abuse.
Because of a secret recording of the brothers' therapy session. It seemed to show that the two had carefully planned the killings. So the question was not what the brothers did, but why. Now again, we talked to the lawyers before the mistrial was announced. So remember, you're getting their candid appraisals of what they did and why they did it.
Based upon this evidence, it will become apparent that this murder was unlawful, unjustified, and wholly premeditated, and that it was accomplished through a conspiracy into which Lyle Menendez entered with his brother, and that but for a few mistakes they made, this was almost the perfect murder.
Armed with the brothers' confession, the prosecution seemed to have an open and shut case in the early days of the trial. The defense had other ideas.
We're not disputing where it happened, how it happened, who did it. We're not disputing when it happened. The only thing that you are going to have to focus on in this trial is why it happened.
Facing such an emotionally charged defense, the prosecution team decided to take the opposite approach.
We wanted to come across, at least in our case in chief, as being sort of unemotional.
Lead prosecutor Pam Bozanich planned to focus on the details without overselling her case.
See, I can look at coroner's photos and eat lunch, and it doesn't bother me. I didn't want the jurors to be like that. I wanted the jurors to still be able to look at the photographs and say, ooh, this is a bad thing.
With the brothers on the stand and the photos in evidence, the prosecution attacked the idea that the parents were a threat the night of the killings, pointing out that near the bodies, police found bowls of strawberries and Eric's college applications.
Can you see what that is that was next to your mother, the letters?
How to enroll, attend without obligation, some sort of parking, registration, etc.
And where is that from?
I assume it's from UCLA.
Now, if your mother had been planning to kill you, would she have been filling out your application for UCLA?
Objection, Your Honor.
It was a high point in the trial for the prosecution.
The prosecutor said, wait a minute, this is not what somebody would be doing if they were planning on killing their children. This is what parents would be doing if they had a normal, maybe a somewhat difficult relationship with the children, but certainly not parents who were planning on taking the lives of their own kids.
Prosecutors probed another weakness in the self-defense claim. With their mother badly wounded, the brothers had reloaded.
When you put the shotgun up against her left cheek and you pulled the trigger, did you love your mother?
Yes.
And was that an act of love, Mr. Menendez?
It was confusion, fear.
You were afraid of her at that point? What did you think she was going to do to you?
At that point, I wasn't consciously thinking anything in particular. I was just reacting.
But Mr. Menendez, you had to reload the shotgun in order to put that round into your mother's cheek, didn't you?
Right.
Prosecution says if you look at how this thing was played out, that they went out days in advance and brought their shotguns, it should suggest to you that this was part of a plan.
The defense was hoping the jury would see it differently.
That is one inference, okay? But it also has another inference, that it is what they said it was, preparing to defend themselves.
Defense attorney Leslie Abramson.
Both are things that have to be thought of, but the ultimate intention is different.
The prosecution continued to build a case of premeditated murder.
The evidence will show that the defendants nearly got away with their crimes. They had meticulously picked up all the shotgun shells from the family room. They had buried the shotguns.
And their star witness was Dr. Jerome Oziel, Eric's therapist, and the man to whom the brothers confessed the killings 3 years ago.
Eric said that he entered the room first, and I believe that he was shooting at his father, and then Lyle followed after him, and basically, quote, Lyle finished off the job.
Terry Moran covered the trial for Court TV.
Well, Dr. Oziel was on the stand for the prosecution for less than a day. His direct testimony lasted less than a day, and he was very cool. He's a super rational man.
Knowing the therapist's testimony was crucial to the prosecution, the defense began hammering away at his credibility on the very first day of the trial.
We will present evidence to you to prove that this man operates on his own agenda, that he has motives to lie about what he was told by the Menendez brothers, and that he has a track record of lying, manipulating, and controlling people for his own selfish purposes.
And they went after him with everything they could find, just hurling epithets at him, hurling insults at him.
Well, did you make the tape recording for the purpose of creating a false record so that you could use the tape to extort money out of the Menendez brothers?
No, Mr. Byrd, I did not.
In an attempt to discredit the prosecution witness, the defense also called a former girlfriend, Judalon Smith, who described Oziel as a monster.
I do believe that he intends to kill me. I was very concerned about coming to this court because he would have knowledge that I would be here, and I have made sure that I have people around me at all times.
In one of the trial's more bizarre turns, Oziel's mistress, who first told police about the brothers' confession, ended up testifying for the defense against her mild-mannered former lover.
He sounds brutal. He sounds like a manipulator. He sounds like a man capable of lying. And so there are two Oziels in this case.
Regardless of Dr. Oziel's credibility, a key moment in the trial came during the closing weeks, when prosecutors won a long battle to have a tape of one of the therapist's sessions with the brothers played in the courtroom.
I did what I thought my mother would want me to do, which is please kill me, and I can't, and I just couldn't just kill my mom. That would be ridiculous. I wanted to get rid of the source.
The tapes were important for the prosecution because the jury was able to hear a different voice of Lyle Menendez, a different voice of Eric Menendez, a voice talking about the killing of their parents that sounded very different from the way they sounded on the stand, and a voice, according to the prosecution, that was describing this carefully planned and premeditated act of murder.
What the tape does for the prosecution is show that Lyle and Eric Menendez, at that stage, just a couple of months after the killings, in talking with their therapist, in confidence, never mentioned sexual abuse.
Almost as if I was like an instrument of hers in killing herself. That's where we sort of feel like, you mentioned before, that we were doing her and us a favor.
Where Lyle Menendez is heard saying that he feels his mother gave them the permission to kill her. You could hear an almost audible sigh go out from the jury box.
With the tape in front of the jury, prosecutor Pam Bozanich felt she had a strong case.
It is icing on the cake. I mean, it's important because it's their own words. It's important also because of the defense they presented. And it was interesting that we got the tape after they'd put on this whole defense. And then their experts have to come back and have to sort of go, let me try to explain this now.
The prosecution argued abuse was never a motive for the killings, offering a much simpler theory: greed.
Shortly after the killings, Lyle Menendez began to spend money. On September the 8th of 1989, 19 days after the killings, a life insurance policy which had been procured earlier by Jose Menendez was paid to the defendants. The policy cumulatively was for $650,000.
Prosecutors pointed out that after the killing, the brothers had gone on a spending spree. Lyle bought a restaurant and a Porsche. Eric hired a tennis coach to help him turn pro. The attacks on the defense continued during rebuttal after they'd presented most of their case. The state called Lyle's ex-fiancée, Jamie Pisarcik, to testify about research she had done for him while he was in jail.
Could you describe the nature of the cases that you were asked to look up in Xerox for Lyle Menendez?
The cases were situations where children had gotten off after killing their parents.
Just before closing arguments began, the defense suffered a major setback. The judge ruled that there was, in fact, no evidence that the parents were a threat to the brothers, and that he would not give the jury the option of freeing the two on self-defense grounds. Now, more than 4 years after that deceptive 911 call to the Beverly Hills police, the fate of the two brothers rested with two juries. When we come back, we'll take you inside the jury room, meet some of the people who spent 6 months listening to the evidence, find out why the jury could not agree.
Coming up, hear from those who sat in the jury box.
What was a typical day of deliberations like?
And were they ever close to reaching a verdict?
Line got more than 6,000 comments since the Menendez trial began in July.
We're talking about two people who are the scum of the earth.
When Court TV brought some of their viewers together, they found some pretty unshakable opinions.
If my parents abused me in a way that I believe Eric was abused, I would hope that I would have killed them a lot sooner.
Oh, my God. Next on Dateline, the actual Menendez jurors. How did they reach their decisions?
They used to collect welfare checks. Now they're getting paychecks. Welfare reform. America Close Up with a solution that can save millions of tax dollars. Get close. Get answers on NBC Nightly News tomorrow. NBC.
Deliberating, there were some important legal issues at stake. Could admitted killers claim they were in fact victims? Could the battered wife defense apply to abused children? The judge's instructions seemed to preclude an acquittal. He gave the jurors 4 options. The most serious, first-degree murder, meaning the killings were premeditated. A conviction could lead to the gas chamber. Second-degree murder, murder without premeditation. Voluntary manslaughter, defined as killing someone without malice, or in the honest but unreasonable belief that they had to defend themselves against imminent peril. The least serious option, involuntary manslaughter, an unintentional killing. This verdict could have set the brothers free with time served. By this time, you may know how you would have voted, but you may be surprised how the actual jurors formed their opinions.
The jury believes there is no reasonable probability of our reaching a verdict or verdicts without violence to our individual judgments.
The trial that began with 2 juries ended with both badly divided.
We were just totally just split. We just split equally. It was very difficult for us.
Eric's jury split early and evenly along gender lines. The men arguing for murder, the women holding firm for manslaughter. For 19 days, they were deadlocked. The atmosphere in the jury room so tense that by the end, they were shouting at each other, the women accusing the men of sexism and homophobia.
I'm glad I was in my jury room.
Lyle's jury stayed at it for a record 25 days, the jurors shifting positions frequently as they worked in vain for a verdict.
Sometimes it was 7-5 for second degree. Sometimes it was 9-3 for voluntary manslaughter.
Over the weekend, I talked with 4 members of Lyle's jury, 3 who argued for manslaughter, 1 who voted for murder. What was the prosecution's finest moment in this trial, do you think?
The pictures.
The pictures at the crime scene?
The crime scene. The autopsy pictures.
We couldn't deny the photographs. It happened.
I mean, some people in our jury room wanted those photos up every day so that we would have to look at them. That was ruled down. We could look at them if we wanted to, and we
So you
passed
decided
around.
not to post them in the room?
Right,
No.
that we had to stare at them every day. There'd be no way.
The jury was profoundly affected by the prosecution's gruesome pictures and by the brothers' tape-recorded confession to their therapist, Dr. Jerome O'Zeal. While the defense claimed the confession was made under questionable circumstances, some jurors felt it spoke for itself.
I don't think he put Lyle under a tremendous lot of stress to be able to get him to talk on tape and confess to the killings, and Lyle knew exactly what he wanted to say about the murder.
But it was here that for many jurors, the prosecution's case began to fall short as they started to focus on the character of the man who made the tape. Not very credible.
For being kind.
These jurors told us they agreed with the defense that the doctor was unethical, unbelievable, and may have been trying to blackmail the brothers when he taped their confession.
There was no way I was going to make a decision to kill my mother without Eric's consent.
Was there a lot of debate and discussion about that? Was that a central point?
Yeah.
Yes, especially at the beginning.
Yeah. We dissected practically every word of that, or every page.
I didn't even want to influence him in that issue. I just let him sleep on it in a couple days.
And what were people listening for? The tone of voice?
The words, planning. You know, they planned it, or let Eric sleep on it. Sometimes very damning words if you just took those words out. But I think you have to take everything that was involved and why that tape was made and had to be considered.
What about the fact that although they confessed to the killings on that tape recording, there was no mention of abuse or fear for their lives being the motivation?
We definitely
We
discussed
it
a lot. But there was a lot of evidence provided again by various people that they were brought up that you don't talk about anything. You covered up everything. You lied about everything. So I think it would be very difficult for them to talk about that.
On the stand, Lyle found it very difficult to talk about reloading his shotgun to finish off his badly wounded mother.
And what did you do after you reloaded?
I ran around and shot my mom.
Prosecutors said that showed the brothers were not acting in self-defense. But these jurors felt that Lyle had been so traumatized by the shootings, he might not have remembered exactly what happened. What did the jury make of the fact that Lyle reloaded the gun that night?
It was discussed. I don't know. It's not even really sure that happened.
Even though Lyle said he reloaded, you...
Well, but I got the impression that Lyle wasn't real sure of all of the events.
One point the prosecution hammered away at repeatedly was the motive. It was greed, they said, and for evidence they pointed to the brothers' spending spree right after the shootings. But these jurors said the brothers didn't have to kill their parents to spend their money.
They always did it all the time.
Huge limits.
Yeah.
And even this juror, who voted for murder, agreed that on this point, the prosecution hadn't been convincing. You think greed was a factor, but not the main reason?
The main factor, no. It was to have his own control over his own life, and not because he was afraid of his dad was going to kill him.
Ultimately, it was that issue, why the brothers killed their parents, on which the trial turned. The defense claimed that the brothers killed because they felt they were in imminent danger from their parents. If jurors accepted that the brothers feared for their lives, then they were instructed to vote for manslaughter. Did you believe that the brothers were not only victims of abuse, but feared for their lives that night?
I did.
I did.
All three of you did.
Mm-hmm.
What was the critical piece of the puzzle that led you to believe that?
There were witnesses that had nothing to gain by saying the things they said. They convinced me that the home that these men grew up in, I could certainly believe that they thought their parents could absolutely do anything and not have to pay for it.
As for those college applications found at the crime scene, the prosecution said that showed the parents weren't planning on killing the brothers. These jurors said all that counted was what was in the brothers' minds.
We don't believe that they were planning on murdering them.
But we think Lyle believed that they were, and that's the difference.
So it was critical in all of your minds that you believed, that they believed they were going to be killed.
Correct.
Yes.
Even jurors who didn't believe that fear was a factor agreed that the defense had won the point. You say fear was a brilliant defense because you can't disprove it.
That's right.
But you didn't buy it.
No. They were in that much fear. They could have left. They didn't choose to do that. He didn't want to do that. He decided, well, this is it. I'm tired of that. This is it. Tired of Mom, too. Let's just get rid of him.
To believe that fear was behind the killings, jurors had to fundamentally agree with the defense's version of life as a member of the Menendez family.
I think Jose was always playing games, mental games, with Lyle, and I think he knew he had Eric under control. And Jose knew how to push buttons, and he pushed them to the limit. And he just pushed one too many.
In your mind, is Lyle an evil young man who was halfway home getting away with murder?
He learned a lot from his dad. I think he's just like his dad. If you want to believe his dad was evil, then Lyle's evil.
Like father, like son.
That's right, like father, like son.
These, then, were the issues that divided the jurors. And in the last days of the deliberations, Lyle's jury struggled one last time to reach common ground. A compromise verdict was proposed: manslaughter in the killing of Jose, a murder conviction for the death of Kitty.
It was tempting.
Yeah, it was
But
tempting.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
If I was on trial for whatever, I wouldn't want somebody to bargain
compromise that way.
with my life.
In the end, they came in with nothing at all. The prosecutor says you sent the wrong message. That children can kill their parents, and the punishment will be neither swift nor certain. How do you respond to that?
I wasn't concerned with public opinion when I made my decision.
I feel like I was following the law.
I feel the same way. We could not take what was going to happen, what the outcome was. That was not to be our consideration. So we didn't.
You just don't kill your parents. If Kitty or Jose was at them at a point where they were going to go ahead and stab them, shoot them, or whatever, then I can see them defending themselves. But none of that happened, and the way they just decided, well, we're just going to take them out, and we're tired of them, we kill it, I don't think that was right at all. It was horrible.
Gruesome killing, defendants who admittedly lied, covered up, and ultimately confessed, and yet no verdict. Some people will ask, what more does it take?
Proof beyond reasonable doubt.
The law.
The law.
The law.
With no verdict the juries could agree on, Lyle and Eric Menendez are in jail tonight. And it could cost taxpayers as much as $1 million to retry them. In a moment, legal experts look at the case. What went wrong? What does it say about the criminal justice system? And what does it mean to future cases?
Coming up, what's next in the Menendez case? Insights from Court TV's Cynthia McFadden and Jack Ford. Plus,
trial. With me now are two who watched the trial from close up. Cynthia McFadden anchored much of Court TV's gavel-to-gavel coverage, and Jack Ford, NBC's legal correspondent, also an anchor for Court TV. Jack, some people call this the "it's not my fault" defense, where the crime is obvious, and yet the defense is, but there were circumstances, and therefore you cannot blame me.
You used to see, or at least the perceptions were, that more trials were a whodunit. Okay, somebody died, let's you, the jury, figure out who did it. We're seeing now a great number of cases where everybody's walked in the courtroom and the defendants have said, you know what, you're right, I did it. But let me tell you why I did it.
See, I think there's something else going on here. I think there are more and more psychological reasons that we understand about why people do what they do. Whether or not we want those psychological reasons to be legal excuses is something the legal system hasn't dealt with yet. And what we're seeing in the Menendez trials and trials like the Menendez trial are people, regular people, jurors, trying to figure out whether or not maybe this psychological truth has any legal merit.
One of the things you see sometimes when a defense becomes popular, in a sense it can become a defense du jour. You know, people say, well, I like this. This sounds good, and it seemed to work with somebody else, so maybe I'll try it myself.
Did the prosecution make some obvious mistakes?
The defendants were very much alive in the courtroom, but the victims weren't. The defendants took the stand, and we saw their pain, we saw their emotion, we saw what they had been through. I think what the prosecution failed to do was to bring Kitty and Jose Menendez into that courtroom with the same passion, with the same understanding, and with the same realities the brothers sat there.
The defense comes in here, and they essentially adopt the old John Wayne, he needed killing defense. He's a bad guy, he needed killing. But how, if you're the prosecutor, you're going to say, what does that mean about Kitty Menendez? She needed killing too because she happened to have been married to an evil man? So they need somehow to reconstruct in the courtroom, most importantly Kitty Menendez, but also to some extent Jose Menendez, so they can come back and say, firstly, in our society, we don't allow this he needed killing. And secondly, there is no reason at all why this woman gets blown away by her own children with shotguns.
Bottom line, did the system work?
When you spend millions of dollars, you take 12 people, actually more than that, 24 jurors plus the alternates out of their lives for 6 months. You call 101 witnesses, you have over 400 exhibits, and at the end of the day, we still don't have an outcome. I'm not sure that means the system is working.
We take 12 people off the street and we say, you listen to everything and you come back and tell us what you think. And when 12 people come back and say, we're not convinced one way or the other, to me that says the system did work. They didn't feel forced to decide something when they truly and genuinely couldn't make up their mind. So we might not like it and it might be very expensive, but to me it says it's working.
Thank you, Cynthia and Jack. Well, the prosecution has already vowed to retry the Menendez brothers, but it won't be cheap and it won't be easy. Here's Court TV's Terry Moran.
We have an ethical, a professional, and moral responsibility to go forward with this case as a first-degree murder case.
Only hours after the mistrial was declared, L.A. District Attorney Gil Garcetti said he was ready to try the case again.
This may cost $1 million, and be damned with how much money it's going to cost. We're going to seek justice in this case.
New jury selection could begin as early as May, but at least one defense attorney predicts another hung jury.
I think that the complexity of this case and the fact that it draws on individual life experiences makes this a case which will probably never result in a unanimous verdict.
If the prosecution is ever to succeed, it will have to discredit the brothers' charges of sexual abuse, something to the surprise of several jurors they failed to do last time.
But I expected the prosecution to have a witness that would say the opposite. And maybe that was part of the reason why they did not prove their case.
If the case is retried, chances are you won't see the same prosecution team.
I would rather eat ground glass for a year than do this trial again.
Next, the latest twist in the Tanya Harding story.